Welcome, my friends, to the Trevor Chapman Show. This is Trevor, and this is our place, yours and mine, where we talk and learn from the best minds on this beautiful earth about entrepreneurship, achievement. We are purveyors of the good life, curating environments that promote and even demand kairos moments of success, happiness, and euphoric achievement. I mean, we work relentlessly to attain levels of the highest performance in business and life. Here is to our collective happiness and to celebrating our human experience. My friends, it's time to run. Welcome to the Trevor Chapman Show, my friends. This is Trevor, and today we are excited to chat with a fascinating individual, Matt Motil. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, brother. Hey, let's bring us up to speed. Give us the 60,000-foot overview of who Matt is, who he was maybe 10, 15 years ago, and what transpired to bring you to the individual you are today.
Sure. So I was raised during the 80s and 90s, and like most people that came up in that generation, I was herded through the front doors of the college system because we were told that it was either go to school and get an education if you want to be something in this world, or go learn a skill. And so I went to college and chased the American dream, and put about close to 20 years into industry before I realized that the momentum that I felt like I was missing, I was never going to get in that space. And then ultimately was able to fire my boss. I used real estate and real estate investing to do that. And we still do that today. We have 3 companies that we run under the same roof here out of our office in Cleveland, Ohio. And we do real estate investing. We do real estate holdings, which is rentals. And then we've got the personal brand of the Dr. Matt Motil stuff. I have books. We do education on helping other people basically do the exact same thing, use real estate to fire their boss forever. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. That's the 500-foot overview.
Well, you make it sound so easy. Surely it hasn't been a walk in the park the last 20 years.
Well, I don't think any of it's really easy. I don't think that anything that's worth doing is ever really that easy, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, I mean, there are definitely days where I sit there and I go, man, it sure would be nice to just have a job again, from the standpoint of running multiple companies and trying to be, chase this new definition of what success means. So yeah, there's definitely days where I go, is this really worth it? And then there's other days where, you get to reap the benefits or the fruits of the labor, so to speak. And you go, yeah, I'd never have this lifestyle, or we'd never be able to provide this for our family, doing it any other way. And so,
what is that definition of success then that you're talking about? This new definition.
It's interesting because on my show, I've got 2 podcasts myself that I do, and on the one, it's all interview based, and I like what you do on your show, where it's just kind of let it organically go where it goes instead of just asking the same questions. But one question I do like to ask everybody is, what is your definition of success? Because to be perfectly honest, for me, and nobody really ever asks me, so it's kind of nice to have it asked around. But the thing is, I think it's dynamic. I think it's an organic thing that as you go through life experiences, as you age and mature, I think that definition has the ability to change, because at one point in time, I think for a lot of the general population, we were chasing the American dream. So it's go to college, get good grades so you can get a good job, so you can get married, have your 2.5 kids, get a house, have some decent cars, go on a vacation every couple of years, and have what the masses believe is financial security, right? Which is in the stability of a paycheck on a regular basis. I used to believe that. I mean, to me, it was, I felt like I had a 6-figure income on a salary job. I had a really nice job title. I felt like I was doing big things. And to me, I was like, I'm successful. And the reality was I was broke. And I'm like, how can I be successful if I have more month left over at the end of the paychecks. So it's changed for me. I at this point in time, my definition of success today is the ability to comfortably do whatever I want to do. And that's really kind of it. I'm going to leave it vague like that. So, I don't answer to anybody else. I mean, I answer to my wife. She's the boss. But at the end of the day, it's like I can work from anywhere. I can do whatever I want to do. We choose to do certain things, right? But I have that freedom to say I can do whatever I want to do. And as long as I can financially do that, as long as I financially can make that happen comfortably, that to me is success.
Well, sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
No, and I was just going to say, like, as the desires of your lifestyle changes, you may have to work harder to achieve that end result. Like if I said, hey, I want to live in Malibu and I want to have a $10 million home and I want it to be on the beach and I want, 10 cars and I want to have, this is the lifestyle I want. Right. And I want to be comfortable and I really don't want to have to think about money. Well, if that's what I'm saying is that's my that's my benchmark, then it might be a whole lot harder to achieve that than just to be able to say, I want that freedom. And it's changed because I used to really believe that I wanted all this stuff. And once you get it, once you have a taste of it, it's nice. Don't get me wrong. It's awesome. But at the end of the day, you go, is that really what I need to have to be satisfied?
Well, so my question lies in this then. How does one balance the knowledge that, we've got all these memes popping across Instagram where, it's not love what you have, don't love what you don't have, and all this stuff of being content. And really, if you go back, this starts with, Epictetus walking around the streets of Athens barefoot and in shards, so that he didn't really need anything else. And we roll it forward, and there's a big movement behind Stoicism now. How do you balance that? Because you're in the online space. You see those memes. You talk to the people on your podcasts that talk about that. How do you balance that with the desire to have? Because having is a desire. So there's two questions. That's the first part. And the second part of the question is, what's your relationship with work? Is it hard for you? Well, today I put out a video. It's about Mondays. And it's kind of the anti-FU Monday Gary Vee thing where he's like, it's basically flipping the bird to Monday. Dude, I love Mondays because Saturday and Sunday, I appreciate them so much for the rest and relaxation. But by the time midday Sunday comes around, my mind is reeling on I'm anxious to get stuff done. Not necessarily need to, because I'm at that point like you where there's a lot of things that just aren't. They don't depend on me. I hate being the bottleneck, and so I do everything I can so that I can just kind of tell the puppeteer how to move the puppet, and then back off. And that's how I prefer things. I'm a really bad manager. I'm a really bad, while I can do details, and I had to for years when I wore all the hats in my brick and mortar companies. So it's not that I need to do things, but it's these things that I just have this strong desire to achieve. So what's your relationship with work, and how do you balance the knowledge that we should just be cool and content with absolutely nothing?
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I think it's a struggle. I mean, I think it really is. It's almost like the metaphor of, you've got these two 800-pound gorillas pulling on your wrists in opposite directions, and you feel like I've got, the internet and the hustle grind mafia is telling me I've got to go in this direction. Excuse me. And then you've got this internal equilibrium, I guess, so to speak, that's saying, no, you need to do this. And for me personally, it's a struggle. There are days, I'll talk to my wife and I'll be like, we both believe that, of the places that we've visited, we love Grand Cayman. We just, every time we're there, it's like paradise for us. And I just go, I'd love to buy a boat and a big yacht out on the island and have chartered tours for the tourists. because there's cruise ships that come in and out of there every single day. And so people are paying fortunes on these cruise ships to go and visit the little islands and the little coves and stuff around the big island. And I go, it would just be nice to live there, own the ship, hire the crew. I don't even want to be the captain of the ship taking people out. I mean, I could if I wanted to. And then just to be like, my day consists of making sure that the crew showed up to take these people, the tourists, out, and we make money doing that. And then I just get to, chill with my toes in the sand and do whatever I want to do because we're financially stable with everything else. And then there's this other side of me that's like, I need to achieve, and I have to, I want to build this legacy piece in that there's something there that is going to live and grow beyond me that I can step back from at some point in time and be like, see all that, and it's like, obviously I'm going to show everybody I've got little kids, right? So it's like in The Lion King, when the dad lion's standing there and he's like, see all this is all ours. We built this. And that's kind of, there's that drive and that fire inside of me that really wants that. And so it's kind of like the yin and yang struggle that, some days it's there and some days it's not. And it's trying to find that balance and which one's going to win out. And so it's interesting because I think, if I'm just being perfectly honest with myself, it's like, I'm doing all this. I'm building all this. I'm hustling and I'm grinding and I'm building a team and we're doing all this good stuff so that someday I can go do that other stuff. And the goal, I guess, would be is to how fast can I make that happen?
So that's interesting because I grew up basically in that lifestyle that you're talking about. I grew up in Guam. My dad was a scuba diving instructor. In Alaska, he was a whale watching boat captain. So I grew up, all I wanted to achieve in life was be my dad's deckhand, on his dive boat. And when I graduated from college, one of my close buddies said, you are either going to be a beach bum or a millionaire. And I said, I'm going to be both. And so it's interesting because I have the same dual nature that you're talking about, where I want either just anonymity and the simple life. In fact, my wife, when things get overwhelming, she's like, hey, let's just go down to Costa Rica and open a dive shop. Luckily, things have not been overwhelming in a long time. But for a good 6 or 7 years after 2008, I was still caught in the aftershocks of the earthquake. I was being pummeled, inside the crest of the tidal wave still. And during those moments, I sought that simple life. But for me, there was two things that occurred. Number one, I too have kids. And growing up, I played every sport until it was time to pay for the jersey. Then I had a great reason why I couldn't play that year. Don't want my kids to grow up like that. And that's minor compared to some of the other things. During the summer, I had to catch 36 salmon every single day so we could make it through the winter, and then play my saxophone on the docks for the tourists that you're talking about on the cruise ships. In Alaska, they line up in a big line, and I'd play my saxophone for them. That was all family money. I appreciate it so much now because it taught me hard work, and I often question, am I ruining my kids by them not needing to, help support the family? I don't know, man. It's a question that's ongoing for me. But to make this long statement short, I have that same yin yang to me. And ultimately, what I've found is that I value more than anything tranquility and peace of mind. And peace of mind in the sense that I don't do the wrong thing, so I never have to have that thorn pricking the membranes of the emotional center of my brain. Like I do not like that feeling. It's like when you do something bad at school, you walk home, the principal's going to call your parents. Now we're 20 years, 30 years after that. So I get that that's a feeling that's hard to associate with now, but nonetheless, it's that feeling of not having peace of mind that I don't like. And so I guess that's the fear side. And then the prospect of gain side is tranquility. And for me, achieving what I am capable of and nothing short of it makes me tranquil. If I feel that I'm falling short of something that I could do, then I am not tranquil. And it's so funny, dude. We just watched The Greatest Showman, and the whole time my wife was nudging me, and I was like, what's going on? And she's like, I think you should learn some things from this movie. And I was like, so she wants me to be content with, a museum of curiosities.
Right.
How do you deal with?
Yeah, no, that's not
enough, man.
I don't think that's the entrepreneur. I just don't think that people that fall into that space can have that. I don't think you can have that contentment of saying, well, there's this, like you said, the museum of curiosities. Like, I can't sit here and go, here's all of this potential. I'm going to put it on a shelf and I'm going to sit back and I'm going to, fold my hands and twiddle my thumbs and just be proud of the fact that I have all of this potential. Like, that to me, I just sit in there and I go, that's a waste.
Prostitution of life, man. I'm with you.
Well, yeah. And but see, the thing is, what you just said resonates so much with me from the standpoint of like, okay, so when I went to start my first company, here I am, I'm coming out of industry. I thought I had achieved some really good stuff. I had worked for really big companies. I mean, the one company I worked for did over $1 billion a year in revenue. And I was a senior manager. And it was like, I've got all this experience. I've been doing this for a really long time. I know how to manage. I have a master's degree. I have a PhD in business. So I'm going to go start a business. I'm going to crush it. And the reality was, we don't teach that in school. And when you come out of school and you jump into an already existing organization, you don't learn how to start a company from scratch. Mm-hmm. You don't learn how to build a team from scratch. You don't learn how to replace yourself effectively. And I had to learn all that stuff. And the reality was, it's almost like every day there's this path that you walk on, and every day it's humbling. And it's more and more humbling to go down that path as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, when you're trying to grow something. Because I look at people that have been doing this for a while and have big teams that they've built from literally nothing. And I look at the struggles that I deal with and I go, they figured this out. They obviously have had to go through this that I'm going through, and they survived and they solved the problems. And there are days where I just go, this is all going to fall apart. There's days where I go, this is all just going to spontaneously combust. And I think everybody goes through that, but I have so much more respect for people that have achieved, because I look at the struggle that I'm going through, not only just externally within the business itself, but internally. And I go, wow, these people have overcome that. Like, I have so much respect for them now. It's very humbling, because you come into it with ego. And when I look at what I want myself, when I look at where I want the company to go, and I look at where I want the business to be, I understand now that I have to become the leader that's going to be able to take it there. And on a lot of levels, I'm like, I'm not there yet. And that, when you said, that makes me not tranquil. And I totally agree. I just sit there and I go, man, I'm frustrated. Like, this is frustrating as hell, that I know where I want to go. I can see it. No matter what I do, I feel like I'm spinning my wheels here in the mud and I'm stuck, and I can see the highway. I just can't get there. It's frustrating. And it's like, man, and that's what my drive is. My drive is like, okay, I'm going to bed tonight. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, and maybe tomorrow we'll figure it out.
Yeah. It's interesting because, as you were saying that, I was recalling one of my listeners is a buddy from high school. And I remember this is probably like 2007. Everything's going well, right before everything was destroyed in 2008. And so I'm just on the top of, my throne, thinking that I've got some knack for entrepreneurship and I'm just special and all this stuff. And I was like, what do you want? And he said to me, I just want a white picket fence and flat screen TV. Now, for work, he counted salmon that were swimming up the rivers in Oregon to spawn. So literally, he counted salmon. And I remember sitting back.
Okay. Like he stood in the water with a clicker?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so I remember sitting there, and I even talked to my wife about this, and I was like, I wish, once everything fell apart in 2008, I recalled that conversation. I sat with my wife and I said, I wish I could just be happy if all I did was count salmon and had a white picket fence. But the thought of it was doomsday. The thought of it brought horror.
I can't tell you how many times I've had that conversation with either like my parents, my wife, my friends, and I just sit there and I go, I just wish I could be happy doing, and I don't want to say it's a menial task, but just there are days where I just go, man, the simplicity in that, right?
Yep, 100%.
You get to go hang out in nature, you count fish, you go home at the end of the day, you don't have to worry about the fish.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be more fish tomorrow. And if there's not, that's okay. And you just go, man, there's simplicity in that. I watch my little kids play. My youngest is about 16 months old right now. And just the innocence and just the peace, and I just watch my son and I just go, God, I want that, but I want it on an adult level. Right. But so it's almost like this weird circling back. And I've done this repeatedly over the last few years where it's like I start out on one path and I go, this is what I want. And then I chase every rabbit that crosses the path, shiny object syndrome. And then I think that that's the right thing to do. And then 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, whatever it is, I end up kind of back at the beginning and I go, interesting. I've just now completely circled back around to realizing that what I ultimately really want is what I set out to do in the beginning. And here I am, and I've learned a bunch and I've got a bunch of experience and I've ultimately, we're back on that path and we're doing it bigger and better and badder than we were before, which is great. But man, we took a long time to get here.
Well, I think that's the process. You have to, because you just described like the first decade of my journey as an entrepreneur, chasing this, chasing that. I had a core competency and I kind of stuck with that. I'm grateful that maybe the last few years I hit my stride. This is how I describe it now. See, I'm in my flow of what it is I should be doing, what I want to do. I am very grateful to be in that flow, to have finally found that, because for years I did what I was not passionate about because I had to pay the bills. I had to make payroll. I had to do this and I had to do that. And now I would describe it as a ladder. It's all going in the same direction. When I elevate myself to rung number 3, I'm happy momentarily. And I recognize that I'm on rung number 3, but there is a 4th rung. And I desire to step up to that. But now I'm grateful that the ladder is going in the same direction and I'm not completely switching paths, So my question is, do you love real estate?
I do. I do love it. And it's interesting that you bring that up because I actually had this conversation with my assistant yesterday. And I said, I love real estate, but in the process of growing the business and building the team and all that kind of stuff, there are days where I get lost in the process. And there are aspects of it where I go, I don't like this. And it's interesting because, ultimately we can do whatever we want, right? And I am my own boss and I can do anything. And this is what I've chosen to do. But I told her, I said, really, if I could do anything and we all got paid just this, Scrooge McDuck amount of money that, it would took care of all of your heart's desires. I'm like, I might just like vlog about video games. And she's like, really? And I'm like, and I say that now and maybe I would do that later on in life. And I would go, man, I just don't want to play the Xbox today, or I just don't want to turn on the PlayStation today, or whatever it would be. And then it just becomes this like, it's I think it's the grass is greener on the other side of the fence kind of a thing where you go, I've got kids, I've got responsibilities, I've got jobs, I've got payroll to make, all this stuff. And you go, what am I not doing that I used to enjoy? And it was like, I really liked playing video games. I wasn't like super competitive or anything like that, but it was a nice escape. I also like to draw and paint. I haven't done that in a really long time either. And so you kind of sit there and you see people that are doing that. Like I see people that have monetized the YouTube channel specifically around playing like a handheld device game on their iPad. And these guys have like hundreds of thousands of subscribers. They've monetized the channel. They're making money at it. And I know that there are people that are basically doing that exact same thing, making like multiple six figures a year. And you go, really? Like, really? Okay. Well, I mean, that doesn't sound bad to me. And especially when you're going through stuff and you're having growing pains and you're working through the struggle, and you see that, it's hard not to have that be like a shiny object where you go, well, I could do that. But it's just kind of interesting. But I do love real estate. I love looking at houses. I love doing deals. I love like the financial side of like crunching the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But there are definitely days where I go, all right, I just don't want to look at a house today. I'm over it. I'm just gonna do something different.
I attribute that to the adaptation and evolution that is kind of responsible for humanity. And I think that this goes beyond whether or not someone believes in creationism or evolution. And, are they mutually exclusive? I don't think so. But that's not the argument. The argument is that as humans, we adapt in any situation we're in. And in order to survive, we can't get complacent. And so we are hedonists. We have hedonic adaptation where anything, bad or good, long enough, loses its savor.
Sure.
And so even, I'll give you an example. I was talking to a buddy of mine. His name's Cameron Manwaring. I love that guy. He one of his clients is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Okay. Flies him out in his private jet, dude, to talk about his YouTube channel.
Nice.
Anyway, he told me about a famous family on YouTube, which I won't mention by name here on air. But at the beginning of their formation, he said, I think you guys should call yourself Family Inc., like Family Incorporated, because this is a family business. They chose on a different name.
Okay.
A name that was kind of more expressive of the dream, what they were going to do, just travel as a family and just like live the life everyone thinks they're going to live once they retire, but live it while they're young.
Okay.
2 years later, successful, millions of subscribers on different platforms, hundreds of thousands of views, millions of views, maybe hundreds of millions. And he told me on the phone a few weeks ago, he's like, I commented on their latest post and I said, probably feels a little bit more like Family Inc. now, huh? And they wrote back and said, more than you know it. Meaning that the travel, the airplanes, the first time that a 5-star hotel puts you up, it's great.
Yep.
But by the 5th time, and you realize you have to put on the smiley face, you have to go down for the photo op, you're not really a tourist. You're an employee. They're hiring you. Yeah, you get the nice food. Yes, you play in the suite. But it's funny how quickly it loses its savor, and you would rather just pay for the hotel so that you can stay there and not have any obligations to them. And I look back, when I don't understand a concept, I say, what would it look like 2,000 years ago? And what it would look like 2,000 years ago is, or even 10,000 years ago, we discover that we can farm. And for the first 3 or 4 years, we're so happy that we're not following the wildebeests, man. And then all of a sudden it's like, dude, we've been here for a long time, and this grain is pretty bland. I'd love to jump on the road and go follow these wildebeests.
Yep.
And it's just this thing that continues so that we don't get complacent, allowing us to survive. And I believe that the entrepreneur today is the, tribal chief of 10,000 years ago, is the explorer, seafaring captain of 500 years ago, is the industrial revolution geniuses, is the Renaissance artists and thinkers. Today, that person that pushes us forward is the entrepreneur, because the entrepreneur now encompasses progress.
Right.
And so all these things in the past have been progress, finding new lands, claiming them, following the wildebeest, developing new tools. It's all, the one thing they have in common is progress compared to where they are today. Tomorrow, because of them, they're in a better place or in a better situation, better built to survive. And the people building a better tomorrow for us today are entrepreneurs. And so because of that, we have the same stuff that allowed them to succeed all those years ago.
Yeah.
And that's how I think of it.
I would agree with that. And I think, the interesting thing is that when it when your passion, because really as an entrepreneur, the only way you're going to succeed is to be passionate about what you're doing. So at one point in time, you had to have absolutely loved what you were doing. Otherwise, it was never going to get off the ground to begin with, because it takes so much effort to get it going. But when it does start to lose, it's like a relationship. As I'm saying this is kind of like I'm thinking out loud, but it's like a marriage. There's a point in time where you're dating and it's like, this is new and it's amazing and we're so in love, and the sky is bluer and the grass is greener and my ice cream tastes so much better. And then eventually you're like, you wake up one day and you're like, oh, it's you again. And and it's not that dramatic, but the thing is, you make a choice. You make a choice in a marriage. You make a choice, and it. People call it the 7-year itch. Some people, I think it's 6 months in. Some people it's 3 years in. Some people it's 7 years in. Some people it's 25 years in. There's a point where the honeymoon phase is over, and you have to physically make that choice of saying, I choose you every day. I wake up and I'm like, you're my spouse, and I'm happy about that. And that has to be a choice. And we don't live in that kind of a society, for sure. But I think that's the same way for the entrepreneur. What the luster of your new love is going to wear off at some point in time, and you're going to have lots and lots of opportunities, and it's going to be the shiny object syndrome of everything that crosses your path is going to look great, especially when you're having a bad day, and you're going to go, I just want to torch this and then go do something different. But the reality is, I think that's the difference between those that make it and are successful and have long-term success versus those that, when they say the average business doesn't last more than 18 months, I think that's why. I think it gets hard. And when it gets hard, you look at it and you go, screw this, I'm out, because there's something else that's there that looks better at that moment. And those that have the ability to dial in the focus and say, nope, this is what I'm choosing to do. That's when every time you hit that, that wall and you choose to blow through it, that's when the growth happens. That's when that's when the expansion happens, and that's when the success comes, that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that, man. That I agree with that 100%. So I'm curious, how did your life change once you realized that you had cancer?
It was interesting because there are a lot of days, even today, where I struggle with the idea of abundance, like an abundance mindset, having an abundance mindset versus living in scarcity. And it was at the moment in time, it was like, this is the worst thing that could have happened to me. Woe is me, and then what I also thought was, I'm 30 years old. And there's little kids that are way worse off than me, that have way worse going on with them than I do. And it was never a doubt in my mind that I'm going to be okay and life is going to go on. And it's interesting looking back, because I don't know that was really necessarily where my mind was at overall at that point in my life. But there was just something inside of me that was just like, you're going to be fine. You're going to get over it. And so there was never a moment. I take that back. I don't want to say there was never a moment in time where I was like, this isn't going to turn out okay. When I went in for surgery and they put you in the operating room and they kind of, they hold your arms out to the sides so they can strap you onto the table so that when they put you out, you don't like roll off. And all I can think about as I'm laying there with my arms, out to the sides is, well, this is maybe a little bit like what Jesus Christ felt like when they were about ready to nail him up and raise the cross up. That was kind of what went through my head. And at that moment in time, I thought, okay, they're going to put me out, and am I going to wake up? And that was terrifying. And I did. The surgery that was supposed to take about 2 hours took about 6.5. And they realized that the tumor that was in my neck had wrapped all the way around the back of my neck, had attached itself to basically your voice box. And the doctor, when he came in, I'm still like groggy. I'm like hopped up on morphine and the anesthesia's wearing off. And he's trying to get me to talk. And I just remember being annoyed as hell. I was like, God, just get out of here. And so I remember talking, and he came back in later that day and he was like, I really wanted to hear you speak and he goes, and I wanted people that knew you to hear you speak because I had to scrape on that so much. He goes, I was worried you were never going to be able to talk again.
Wow.
And it was at that moment, I was just like, so I remember laying in that bed, and interestingly enough, the morphine hit me right at that moment, and I had to throw up, and I got this like massive incision in my neck, and so it's not really fun to puke while you've just had your neck opened up. But the interesting thing was laying in that, because they keep you overnight to make sure that you're going to be okay and stuff. And I remember in the hospital room by myself. And I remember at that moment thinking, man, I had that thought in my head that I could die and never wake up again. And then the doctor comes in and basically is telling me he wasn't sure if I was ever going to be able to talk again. And what goes through your head, at least for me at that time, was I'm not happy. And it wasn't like this like superficial, like, well, this sucks to be in this hospital bed. It sucks I just had surgery. It sucks I have cancer. It was like on a more macro level. It's like, I hate my job. I'm in a toxic marriage. I don't like the majority of the people I have to spend time with at work. I really don't have a whole lot of close friendships. And I'm just not happy. And it was like at that moment I thought, I need a change. I don't know what that means, but I need to figure it out. And that kind of set me on a path of, I need to do something different. And what I realized, and this is in my book that I wrote called Man on Fire, I call this the middle class trap. And what it was I was making $100,000 a year at that time, and I had debt equal to what I was making. So we were basically living paycheck to paycheck, even though we were making a ton of money. And when I said, I hate where I work, I need to make a change, what I realized was, in my naive, very narrow-minded mindset at that time, was I can't go and make $100,000 a year in any other industry, because I'm going to have to go and start over as basically like entry level, and no one's going to pay me outside of the construction industry this kind of money, which is, looking back, like that's such a foolish thought process, but that was how I really felt. That's how I think that's how the education system really kind of like trains us that this is all you're capable of doing. And so I was like, well, shit, all I can do now is switch from one, I used to say it's the same circus, different clowns. So I'm just going to go from company A to company B, and hopefully those people don't suck as bad as these people did. But the reality is, like, if you're not happy with that industry, it really is the same circus, different clowns. You're going to have the same personality types. The names and the faces are going to change, but you're still going to have that one jerk that, condescendingly tells you you're doing a great job when you're not. You're always going to have this guy, that does this. You're always going to have that person who, makes it difficult for you to do your job. I mean, it's just like the same personality types are there. And when I realized that, I was like, oh my God, I'm literally stuck. Like, I have so much debt. And the thing is, I just think because of my personality type, it was like the idea of, let's light a match and basically walk away. Like, could I have said, yep, we're going to put the house on the market. Yes, we're going to have to take a loss. That's okay. We'll just walk away. Let's just walk away from all of it and start over. Like, that was just never an option. So for me, I felt trapped. And I think there's a huge percentage of the population that's in that same boat that goes, I hate this, whatever that is, but I don't know how to get out of it. And that's really where I was. And it was like, okay. And it took me another 4 years before I was in a position to say, okay. And I went through 2 different companies, to figure that out. I went into consulting, working for a big consulting firm, biggest construction management company in the world. And then a recruiter dangled a carrot to come back into contracting. and I lasted about 6 months. And at that point in time, I had enough rental properties that we could cover our monthly necessities with rent checks. And when I basically ruined that last employment opportunity because I was a horrible employee at that point, it was like, you know what, I'm not going back. I'm going to do my own thing. I don't know how that's going to work. We don't have as much money as we'd like to feel comfortable to make this leap. But you know what? It's time, and enough's enough. And I said I was going to do it at some point in time. And you know what? It's never going to be perfect. We just have to pull the trigger and take that leap and just hope that it'll work itself out. And in the meantime, I went through a divorce. And the ironic thing about all of that was I realized very quickly that, okay, I'm in a bad relationship. This isn't good. I need to get out of this. All of these things that I was so desperately clinging to that I was like, I can't walk away from my house. I can't walk away from my stuff, all this and all that. When you go through a divorce, you lose it all. Like, you have no choice. I mean, the state, I live in Ohio, so the state's like, it's community property. So you have to, my wife didn't work. So they're like, well, you give her half your income. You give her half the stuff. And it was like, we had no choice at that time to basically dissolve it all and divide it up. And then here I was completely by myself with nothing and thinking like, well, that wasn't that bad. And it was like, I can move forward from here. And why was I working so hard against myself to think that I had to hang on to all of this? And here I am, and the universe has basically forced it upon me that I've now shed all of this burden and I can go in any direction I want. And like I said, I then switched industry, kind of same industry, but I switched companies and then ended up switching again. But it was a whole lot easier to make that transition when it was like, I don't have to worry about the massive mortgage. I don't have to worry about the car payments. I don't have to worry about the stuff. I was living very lean at that point in time. And I met my wife that we're married now. And when we started dating and stuff, we had very similar goals. I had a couple rental properties already. The house that I got saddled with, we were upside down because we had bought it right at the, when the market shifted. And so we couldn't sell it. And so I turned it into a rental property and it was doing well. And she's like, oh, I always wanted to do rentals. She's like, I always thought about fixing up my house and then turning it into a rental property. And that's basically what we did. We kind of started building that stuff together. We had very similar mindsets and we actually work together to this day. I mean, she's a nurse practitioner, so she does that part-time. And then the other part is she's really the integrator to, my visionary entrepreneur. And so she really kind of runs things in our company because she does all the stuff that honestly I'm not wired to do.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. I love that. So what inspired you to write your book and what was your biggest challenge in writing it?
Well, the interesting thing was, so ego is what inspired me to write the book. Just being completely transparent. So here I am, I'm Dr. Matt Motel, right? And I don't have a book. And so and I'm meeting people on my entrepreneur journey that have books. And I'm like, well, I have a PhD. I should have a book. And it's very like all ego. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. And I think a lot of people, I think the majority of the general population would, if they were honest, would say, I'd love to write a book someday. It doesn't have to be a biography. It doesn't have to be, nonfiction. But I just think that people were raised being forced to read. We're raised, having literature in our lives and things of that nature. And I think on some level, everybody goes, yeah, it'd be really cool to have a physical, tangible book with my name on it. And I wanted that. And so I started working with Ryan Stewman in 2016. And one of the first things we talked about is he's like, what do you want to do? What are we going to do for the next 12 months? And I'm like, oh, I'd love to write a book. And he's like, oh, easy. And I'm like, really? Okay. And so he basically told me, he's like, I've written 4 books at this point. This is how you do it. You know, I'll help you. I'll write the forward for you. And I literally, you know, taking the method that he described, I wrote my book in like 2 weeks. And
2 weeks. You wrote it in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Dude, can I say something real quick while you say this?
Sure.
If, you know how when you look in retrospect, all of a sudden things that you would not consider in the past just keep popping up everywhere? And this concept of writing a book in a very short period of time has been blasting the lens of my life for like the past 6 months.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, dude, like nonstop. And like you described me, I want to write a book. I've planned on writing a book. It's never been, quote, the right time to write a book. And, it's time to lose the excuse and own it and just do it.
Sure.
But anyway, it's so 2 weeks, man. You wrote your book in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So let me kind of break it down for you. I got hooked up with an editor. Hillary Jastrom is her name, and she's amazing. And so what I did was I created an outline, like I wrote out kind of where I wanted the book to go, just a general overview, like a 500-foot elevation view. And then I did like 3 to 5 bullet points of what I like, the main topics of each chapter. And then I really kind of just went and filled it in, and then I just sent it to her. And she read through it, and it was really like a skeleton at that point. And she read through it, and she's like, not knowing me, not knowing my story at all, came back, and she spent maybe 2 weeks with it, and then she emailed it back to me, and it was just like, it was like your 9th grade English literature paper that you just got back, and the thing was just bleeding red all over the place. With we were doing it in Word, so it's like track changes, but there's just notes and cross-outs and just questions everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. And the reality was somebody who had no idea what my story was asking me, I need more details here. Go deeper. What's this?
Good.
What happened next? Tell me more about this. And so I went through it. I kind of digested it. And then we jumped on a call. It was a Saturday afternoon. We talked on the phone maybe for about 5 or 6 hours, just going through the notes. And then I filled in, I answered all the things that she wanted me to go deeper on, and things that I'm like, I can't do that. Next thing I know, I've written like an extra 10 pages or something. And I sent it back to her. And so I probably had it for 2 weeks. So she had it for 2 weeks. I had it for 2 weeks. And then she got it back. She read through it again, like 2 or 3 more times, cleaned it up, sent it back to me. I read through it twice and just kind of like, really was quick at that point. And then it was done. So, I say I wrote it in 2 weeks, but then there was a back and forth for probably about 4 or 5 weeks. And then it was 100% finished. So less than 2 months from start to finish of a completely done product.
That's so fascinating to me. Yeah, it's a good kick in the rear, man, to get me moving. So kind of as we start to wind down, I've got a few more questions for you. You said you wrote your book out of ego. So one of the things that I've recently just accepted, and instead of trying to dig out of my skin as if it's a malignant wart, I've decided, you know what, it is what it is. And instead of being embarrassed by it, I will embrace it and use it to further me ahead, is the fact that 50% of my drive is because I am significance driven. And so, I'll walk through the airport. I'll either want complete anonymity. I can remove myself from the face of the planet and it will not affect anybody. I've got that side to me. Or I want to be stopped a dozen times and have selfies taken with me. Those two things. I am significance driven. So you said that you wrote your book out of ego. So here's where I'm at. I believe, because of the way I was raised in society and everything like that, I'm not talking about my parents, I'm just saying in general, that it is not good to seek significance through the eyes of others. We should be completely interdependent or independent and not seek that, but I do seek that. What of the things that drives you, or what of your character traits are you most embarrassed about, but it's just a fact that this is in you? Not to say you can't remove it, but it's there. It's a trait that you've got.
So you were saying your stuff, and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm going to respond this way, and then you just drop that question. I'm like, oh, we're going in a completely different direction. No, it's kind of interesting because I just had this conversation about significance, and we talk about, like you said, do we move to Costa Rica and do we set up a dive shop, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, and it's an ego thing, but it's also a contribution thing. I think that what drives a lot of entrepreneurs is contribution. And yes, I could go count salmon in the stream, and I could go home and I could hang out with my family, and I could, watch some TV, maybe Netflix and chill, and then get up the next day and do it all over again. But what's missing there is that contribution element. And I think that that's what really drives a lot of us is that I need to contribute. And on some level, yes, it is ego. It is cool to see your name. It is cool to have people tag you on social media. It is cool to have people like actually want to have conversations with you. It's cool to see your name in print, and all of that. But at the same time too, what really drives me from a contribution standpoint is when people reach out to me and they go, hey, I just read your post. I needed to read that. Or somebody says, you know what? Hey, you posted this about how you were feeling depressed after you had cancer and you were thinking about killing yourself. That post saved my life. Like that to me, as I go, holy cow, like that's contribution. And that, where it may have started as an ego thing, it's now driving from the standpoint of like, I have this force of good that I'm putting this momentum out there and it's paying back. And it's just the idea of like, when you gift things to other people, it feels amazing. And I think that's what contribution is. Now, from like to answer your question, like circle back around here and say, what traits am I most embarrassed about myself? It is, one, I think I'm a much better communicator than I am, if I'm just being completely transparent. I think I'm an amazing communicator. I think that I love to talk. I love to hear the sound of my own voice. That's why I've got 2 podcast shows. I just love that. But and that's part of, I think, the reason why people get doctorates is so that they can stand up in front of groups and have credibility and just listen to themselves talk. And again, completely ego driven. But I don't do as good of a job communicating as I think I do. I know that I get feedback from those that are close to me that go, hey, you really suck at this. And it's frustrating for me because I just go, no, I'm good. and I'm really not. That's part of it. I think part of it too is that sometimes I get so completely caught up in what I've got going on and what I'm trying to achieve and the contribution and all this that I'm trying to build and the legacy piece and all that kind of stuff, is that I don't do a good job being present for the people that matter the most. I know that there are times where, I'm physically in a room with my wife and my kids, but I'm mentally not. I'm checked out. I'm worrying about this deal, or I'm worrying about, is this money going to come through, or I'm worrying about, is that deal actually going to close? And those things are like going through my head. And so I don't do as good of a job. And all of this stuff is stuff that I know I need to work on, and I know that I need to get better at, and all that kind of thing. I used to be really, and one thing that I think I've actually gotten a lot better at is admitting all the areas that I suck, and just kind of acknowledging that, coming up through the employment space, I think we tell everybody that here's your job description. You have to do all of this, like it or not, because that's what the job is. And so if you spend years and years and years in industry being an employee for other people, you have this mindset that I've got to take all this crap and I've just got to deal with it. And it's just, that's life. And the reality is, as an entrepreneur, you have the ability to like trade your dollars for other people's time, and you can give them all of this crap. And the funny thing is that there's a lot of people, like I remember when I hired my first assistant, I had a mentor and I'm like, I need to hire an assistant. How do I do this? And they said, well, make a list, like do a time study, make a list of all the things that you don't like doing, or that you procrastinate on that aren't driving revenue into the business. And then take that list, put it on Indeed.com, And that's your job description. I'm like, no one is going to apply for this job. This job is just a flaming pile of crap. And the reality is, that's how I feel about it. But there are people that are going to look at that list and they're going to go, this job is amazing. And the interesting thing is that there are people out there that want to do that kind of stuff. They look at the things that I like to do, like be on podcast shows and do Facebook Live videos and marketing and all this, and like putting myself out there and being the brand ambassador for everything that we do. There are people that are in our organization that are just like, oh my God, you will never get me to do that. And to me, like, I go, that's fun. And so I've had to get really serious about what am I not good at and how quickly can I offload this to somebody else?
I think that's critical to scaling. If you don't do that, you cannot scale. I mean, that right there. I mean, you can wear as many hats as you're good at, but the second you're not good, or it's not a revenue generating activity in some form, second or third generation. I agree 100%. So last question before we come to a close here. You had written somewhere that your hormones were all out of whack after you had your cancer surgery and you're coming off this divorce, and you were going through a dark version of life. That I went through my own 2008, and I've recently been talking with a lot of people who just open up and they talk. For years, it was not cool to ever mention that you were sad or depressed or felt doom or anxiety or anything. Like, it was like, dude, are you a man or not? At least that's the impression I had. And so I just wouldn't even talk about it. I wouldn't talk about how horrendous 2008 was. But now, past it and seeing it in retrospect, I recognize it for what it is. And I wish that someone had come to me and said, hey, dude, guess what? This is normal. You're not strange because you're not happy right now. That is okay. Everything fell apart. You lost everything. It's normal to not be happy. You shouldn't be happy about that. And so now I talk about that, but the question I have is, tactically, what did you do when your hormones were all jacked up, when you were going through the divorce, when everything was falling apart? Tactically, what did you do to move forward, other than what people say, oh, just keep on keeping on, or whatever the case is? Like, what were some of your tricks that worked for you?
Well, the interesting thing was, I had thyroid cancer. So your thyroid does a ton of stuff that everybody takes for granted, to be perfectly honest. And when you're lacking all of those hormones, you get massively depressed. You get massive fatigue. You lose all focus whatsoever. And the weird thing was, it was a surreal experience, because I would leave work. I would just be mentally drained from the day of, a 12-hour day in construction management. And I would be driving home, and I would literally be driving my car, and I would be looking for a place to careen my car to make it look like an accident so that I could die. And I was with it enough that it was almost like this surreal out-of-body experience where I was like sitting in the passenger seat looking over at myself being like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? And it was like, so I was having these thoughts, I was having these like suicidal thoughts, suicidal tendencies, but I was with it enough to go, oh my God, this is terrifying, because I knew that I was screwed up. And the thing was, I struggled with it for a really long time. And you're absolutely right. Like, I think there's a huge stigma in our society about mental health. Mm-hmm. I used to think that it was an excuse that people made to basically justify their bad behavior or lack of coping with what they've got going on.
Okay.
And the reality was, once I went through it myself, I was like, oh wow, this is really real. Like, this is for real. And one thing, it was scary, but like two, like I've got health insurance now, but it doesn't cover that kind of stuff. So I couldn't physically go and talk to somebody today unless I wanted to pay cash out of pocket, because it's not covered by my insurance plan. And I just go, and that sucks, because I think everyone should talk to somebody, because I think we're all screwed up on some level to where it's nice to have a third party, one, tell you, hey, you're not as screwed up as you think you are. Mm-hmm. And two, to not not hang that baggage over you forever, because your loved ones, your friends, your family, your spouse, your parents, your grandparents, they don't forget. So like you can call your mom and be like, Mom, I feel sad. Here's what's going on, blah, 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 blah. And then 6 months later, your mom's going to be like, well, are you doing okay? Because remember how you felt 6 months ago. And you're like, Mom, I'm fine. And I'm not just saying like this is a conversation that you have with your mother, but the interesting thing is like, your friends and your family, they don't let go of it.
Yeah.
And it's just human nature. But a trained professional has the ability to be like, all right, well, our hour is up. We'll talk about whatever it is you want to talk about next week or next month, whenever it would be. And 6 months later, you're on to a completely new thing. And they're not bringing it back up again, being like, well, are you sure you're okay? Remember what we talked about 6 months ago, Matt? It just doesn't have that. So I think there's a tremendous amount of value there. So for me personally, when you say, what did you tactically do? I will be perfectly honest. When people say, well, when you hit rock bottom, it's great because there's nowhere to go but up from there. And I say bullshit to that, because here's the deal. Sometimes you can hit rock bottom
and you're flat.
And then the current takes you and drags you along the bottom of the surface for a really long time.
Yeah. Yep.
And you have this feeling like, holy shit, I'm going to die down here. And you can't come up for air, and it feels like it's suffocating, and you don't know what you're going to do. And so the thing is, when people go, well, when you hit rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. That's said by somebody who's obviously never experienced that for real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because when you really, truly, honestly hit rock bottom, that's when you put a gun in your mouth and you're like, do I have what it takes to pull the trigger right now? And you taste the oil in your mouth. You smell the gunpowder, and you're just sitting there. Like for me personally, sitting there, tears streaming down my face, thinking about who's going to find me, who's going to have to clean up after this, what are they going to tell my kids, and what are they going to tell my employer, who's going to take care of this, that, everything else, and all that stuff starts going through your head. And it's like, so I don't want to sit here for anybody listening and go, well, step one is do this. Step two is do this. Because here's the deal. I mean, the reality is, like, I was one decision away from not having this conversation with you or anybody else, and that was 8 years ago. No, it was 6 years ago. So I would say the biggest thing that helped me was, one, admitting that I was struggling and getting help professionally. Go to talk to somebody.
So professional, not just talking with a friend, not just talking with a loved one.
Well,
like, because I feel like human connection,
Yeah, I think that's a good step. But here's the deal. One, your friends are not professionally trained to help you. Like they can be there and be like, I understand what's going on. It's going to get better. I'm here for you. If you need to talk to somebody, let me know. But the thing is, like, that's great. And that sounds good. And then the minute that conversation's over, the minute that meeting is over, you find yourself back in your like fortress of solitude. And that's when the demons are back there telling you, like, you know what, man, it's just too hard. You should just give up. And that's where I personally, honestly believe that when you've got somebody that you can go to that you feel comfortable with, because it's, one is this person physically capable of helping me? And two, do I feel comfortable being vulnerable with that person to like let it out and let it go? It's amazing because I've done this a couple different times throughout my life where I've gone and I've had a regular session with some kind of a counselor. And it is amazing how much progress you can make in a really, really, really short period of time. Like, you can go 2 or 3 sessions. Like, you could go every Wednesday for an hour. And 3 weeks later, you're like, I'm good. Like, I don't need to come back. I feel great. And you could have been in a really dark place at that point in time. But it's so therapeutic to, one, talk to somebody who is not judgmental, who actually physically is trained to help you and to extract those feelings and to help you move past them. But then also to be able to tell you, just from a very like human nature caring standpoint, like, hey, you're not screwed up. Like, you're going to be okay. You're going to get through it. Now tell me about this. And they can guide you on a path of healing. Whereas your friends can be there for you. Your loved ones can be there for you. And you need that. but they aren't physically capable of taking your hand and walking you down that path in a relatively quick succession to get you from point A to point B, like I think a trained professional can.
Matt, I think
but it really is.
Go ahead.
I really think what it comes down to, though, step one is you have to admit to yourself that you aren't going to be able to solve this by yourself. And two, that's okay. Like, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And not admitting that you have a problem is not strength. And admitting that you need help is not weakness. And I think that's the key. I think we really do live in this really, really weird time to be a dude. Yes. Because society in general wants to emasculate the man. Totally. It's not okay to be a dude for real. And then at the same time, there's all this stuff that's put on us that says, well, if you do anything that's not manly, so it's bad to be a man, but then don't do anything that's not manly because now you're not really a man. And I think for men growing up in this like time, you just go, what? Like, I don't understand. I'm confused. And we really can't blame you because we're sending all these mixed signals. But I think at the end of the day, for anybody that would listen to this, and it doesn't just have to be a guy, you are not less of a man for admitting that I can't do this on my own and I need somebody to take my hand and guide me to where I need to go. And you're not more of a man by keeping it all in and not admitting that you need help.
You say that so eloquently. And so I just want to add in there that not only is that true, but it's almost non-human to be able to do anything solo. You know, when we find skeletons from 10,000 years ago, they're always solo. It's the ones that ran off away from the tribe that did not survive, got frozen in a glacier or sunk into a tar pit. Survival occurred with a support system around you, a tribe. It's so critical to have that tribe. And I'm not talking about the buddies that you go and watch the sports game with, though that can be a tribe. I'm talking about, sure. Every tribe had the shaman that helped them in these moments of need. And so, Matt, you put that so beautifully, dude. I not only commend you, but thank you for just being transparent and open about this, because this is something I think, especially guys of our age, I think we're the same age. We grew up with He-Man on TV, G.I. Joe, Rambo. And
it's on Netflix again, by the way.
It's awesome, dude.
The original He-Man is on Netflix. I just found it the other day, and I sat all of my kids down. Their ages range from 10 to 16 months. And I was like, we're going to watch this right now. And they're like, Dad, this is like, because the animation's not very good. The colors aren't bright and vibrant like a Pixar film. And you watch it and one, it holds up, kind of, for being almost 40 at this point. It's like, it holds up. But it's funny you brought up He-Man because I made my kids watch it. And I'm like, kids, this was like Daddy's favorite show. This and Voltron was like Daddy's favorite show as a kid. And there's like a new Voltron on Netflix now too. And we go to the store and I'm like, hey, this is the Blue Lion. And they're like, how do you know about this? I'm like, kids, please. I'm like, this show was on in 1985. So good, Matt. It's kind of funny.
Well, Matt, where can people find you online and how can they engage with you?
I'm big on social media. So anywhere, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. I have profiles on everything. Everything is Dr. Matt Motil, Dr. Matt Motil. I'm my main Facebook profile, I'm getting close to, I've got like 6,000 followers and stuff. So everything I post is public. So don't worry if I'm at that moment in time, I'm maxed out and we can't be quote unquote friends. You can follow me and engage with me. Send me a message. I'm the only one that checks my Facebook messages, or you can get really the center hub of everything online is drmattmotil.com. We've got a bunch of really good real estate stuff there. We got business and mindset stuff out there. We have a free guide. We call it the Pissed Off Guide to Financial Freedom. We've got guides for remote real estate investing. We've got, basically how to become a real estate investor with zero experience. We've got all that kind of stuff out at the website, drmattmotil.com.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you, audience, for listening. We will see you again tomorrow. Same place on iTunes.